I want to fix the dishwasher. I want to grow tomatoes. I want to make a new recipe tonight. So those are active searches. The third one was the I want to go moments. And these are location specific. So it could be, you know, a vacation at the Jersey Shore, but it could be something as simple as, I want to go to the supermarket. Let me get online and see if it's open tonight. Okay. So, and then their fourth one was the I want to know moment. And these include searches for news, general knowledge, how to return the item that you bought online last week, you know, that kind of stuff. But, oh, and let me just mention, this is based on cell phone use. But I think, you know, given computer use and where we are today, that there are probably more of these moments. I'd like to talk about the I want to be entertained moment. We go online to watch videos, we go online to hear concerts, we go online for all kinds of entertainment reasons, to get away from the stress of the world. There's also the I want to be inspired moments. I want to be inspired with new colors and patterns and fabrics for my living room. Or I just want to be inspired and I go to the Tiny Buddha website. There's plenty of inspiration that you can find online.
Suzanne, somebody's asked to make your microphone a little louder. Can that be possible?
Yes, it probably can, but give me a moment. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Hold on.
Maybe if you just speak up or move closer, it'd be helpful.
Let me. Okay, let's try this. Is this a little better?
Much better.
Oh, good. Okay. Oh, so we were talking about how people get to websites. Oh no, let's go back. I'm sorry. Now that I've lost my train of thought here. I want to, okay, the last one, not that Google was thinking about, was I want to stay in touch moments. And this has really come to fruition here with the COVID. We're on FaceTime, we're on Zoom, we're on Facebook Messenger, we're on a lot of online communication platforms because we need to stay in touch these days. So those are more of the moments that we use and reasons that we get online. So say someone goes online and they're searching for an answer, a service, or a product, and it leads them to your website. Great. Unless, of course, they don't want to engage with your website. Whether it's because of poor design, it's too hard to read, it's too ugly, it's too complicated, they're going to return to the search engine results page. It's called the SERP page. And that return to the SERP page is called bouncing. If you get a lot of bounces, it tells Google that your website is not great and it's not the answer to these questions, and your rankings are going to go down. So let's talk about how bounce rate is calculated. Bounce rate is the single page visits divided by the total visits for any session. It could be day, it could be week, could be month, whatever you're using. So say you had 500 visitors to your website last month, but 250 left without taking any action, or they bounced. So you take the 250 and you divide it by the 500, and you've got a 0.5 or 50% bounce rate. In general, you should expect your bounce rate to be somewhere between 25 and 70%. You can see the averages here. So let's talk about some specifics of why people bounce. They can leave because you get to your site and it's not what they expected. It could be a misleading title tag or an incorrect meta description. They could leave for technical errors. They get a blank page or a 404 error. They can leave because they don't know what to do next. They can't figure out the website, so they're gone. They leave because the page is slow to load. The site may not be mobile friendly. They can leave because of a really obnoxious user experience. If you have lots of pop-ups, pop-up buttons, email surveys, things that flash in their face, they're gonna leave. And they also will leave if the quality of the content doesn't impress them or inspire them. So how do you make sure that your website captures their intention and inspires them? And by the way, you've got less than 15 seconds to do this. You will need to really create a good first impression for them to stay on your website and move through it. So we're going to talk about user experience and user interaction.
And before you go there, Suzanne, we have a question about how bounce rate is calculated. How do they know your bounce rate?
Who's they?
Google.
Google doesn't, you do.
Okay.
You can calculate, well, I mean, yes, I'm sorry, Google does. I shouldn't say that. Google absolutely does. Go to Google Analytics, analytics.google.com, and if you don't have that on your website, you can look it up, you can attach it, and you can see exactly what your bounce rate is, all right? But everybody should have Google Analytics on the back end of their website, all right? So user experience and user interaction, we're going to talk about that next. User experience design is a human-first way of designing products. The phrase was coined back in the 1990s by Don Norman, who was a cognitive scientist, and he describes it as the user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. Essentially, user experience can be applied to anything. It could be the website, it could be the coffee machine, it could be the visit to the supermarket. It's not a digital term. User interface, on the other hand, is strictly a digital term. User interface is the point of interaction where the user and the digital device or product connect. Think of on your phone, you touch the screen on your phone. It could also be on the coffee machine, opportunity to select, you know, cappuccino versus espresso, user interaction, all right? So if you take the user experience and the user interface principles and apply them to web design, the guiding principles for experience are make things simple and intuitive, communicate concepts in a logical succession, and meet your audience's needs. Don't put lots of bells and whistles in that are not necessary. User interface means that the functionality of your interactive elements should be really obvious. Uniformity should guide usability. And design choices should be made with a clear purpose. All right? So if we have these principles down, now we can move into basic web design elements. I've divided the web design elements into two sections, visual and functional. Let's start with the visual first, okay? We're going to talk about written copy and content. So at its heart, your website is there to deliver content. The design elements are there to support that content. People could visit your site because it looks pretty, but they're going to return because of the content. Your content should exist, most of it anyway, before you start making a website. And in addition, you should have a really clear vision and mission statement. That will help guide you as to the purpose of your website. Here's a list of the 5 W's and an H. This one has been tweaked a little bit for online marketing, courtesy of Rick Ugodovich of thinkinfo.com. But if you have a mission and a vision statement already written out, you can see that you can answer these first 3 questions right off the bat. You know why you're doing this, and you know what it is, what your message is, and you know who your audience is. Now, the rest of these, because we're talking websites, are pretty clear. Where will your message be read? It's going to be read on people's phones. It's going to be read on their iPads. It's going to be read on their computers. It's going to be read on any mobile device they can get their hands on. And we're going to talk about how to structure the website a little bit coming up. And when timing of creating and publishing a website, that can really vary depending on the amount of content and how big the website could be. So it could be anywhere from a couple of months to 6 months or a year for really large websites. But most small business websites can be created in 2 or 3 month period, all right? So now let's move on to talk about fonts and some of the specifics that go into website design. Different fonts communicate different subconscious messages to people. This can actually help you build your brand. Specific fonts can convey trust, strength, elegance, sophistication. And in addition to the font itself, you have to think about how it's aligned, the spacing, the color, all of that ultimately influence how that message is perceived. You may be familiar, some of you out there, with Canva. Canva is a great tool for making social media posts, but they also have a very interesting font combination page. And when I landed on it, it's the image on the left side of your screen. They have all different projects using different fonts. So I clicked on the climate change one up there in the right-hand corner. And when it popped open, if I click on the fonts in the middle of the image on the right side of the screen, you can see that it's identified the smaller font, the best way to make sure you've got a killer presentation, as Godot, and it's an 18.1 size. So you can play around with this and get an idea of fonts for your website and how different fonts work together. When you're picking fonts, you don't want to pick too many. 2, 3 is the max that I use on any given website. And if you don't have the font that you like on your computer, you can download it. There's a few Google fonts, Font Squirrel, 1001 fonts. Just one word of caution here about that. If you're downloading a font, make sure it's a fairly commonly used font, even though you don't have it on your computer, because if you pick a font that nobody has on their computer and you use it on your website and somebody opens that website on their computer, they don't have that font. So what's going to happen is their computer is going to select what they think is an appropriate font and just plug it in. And then your whole design looks different, okay? So that's something to think about as you're, as you're looking at fonts. Let's move on to colors. Colors are fun. Colors are really important when you talk about website design. When choosing colors for your site, it's important to focus on aligning your colors with your brand and the message you're trying to convey. The choice of colors depends on the purpose and the clientele. It's helpful if you already have a logo or an image that you're working with, because you could pull the colors right out of that. I frequently bring images into Adobe Colors. I have a whole Adobe suite, but Colors on the left-hand side is a free program that you can pull color of image in, and it will tell you all of the colors within that image. If you're starting from scratch and you just want to look at different color palettes, Color Hunt is a great one. You can sort it by different colors, so you can look at all the black and whites or the greens or the grays. That's kind of fun. If you are on another website and you like the colors, there are color picker tools that you could put on your browser. ColorZilla or the Color Pick eyedropper, they can be downloaded right onto your browser so that you can select the colors on any website and then use them on your website. Those are very handy to have. Okay, now that we've got the colors and the font done, let's talk about the layout. Layout is the way the graphics and the text are arranged. The goal of the layout is to help the viewer find the information they're looking for at a glance. It's really important to get the visual hierarchy correct. Without a clear visual hierarchy, all the content on the page seems to be equally important, making it confusing and overwhelming. The text and the graphics need to be placed appropriately without being too congested and too much information. Make sure your pictures are resized so that they're smaller. Keep in mind that there's space between every element. There's space between the pictures. There's space between the paragraphs. There's space between the lines. There's even space between the letters that you can control when you're making a website. And in general, too much space is better than too little space. All right, so once you've got your design worked out, then it's really good and important to keep it consistent throughout the website. The user experience improves when you're consistent in your design. This means keeping all of the repeating elements of your website the same throughout the entire site. Fonts, buttons, photos, colors are just a few of the elements that need to be visually consistent. Visual consistency helps the user learn the website, and it also helps with navigation because they understand the website better. All right, And we're going to talk about navigation pretty much next. We're going to move on now to some of the functional elements. So that includes navigation, speed, the site structure, search engine optimization, ADA compliance, and cross-browser and cross-device compatibility. So let's start with navigation. Website navigation allows visitors to flow from one page to the other without getting frustrated. And don't forget, people visit lots of websites every day. There's no shortage of places to find what they're looking for. If you don't have a clear website navigation menu or some other way to explore your site, they are gone. Just as a point, a rule of thumb, your website navigation structure should allow someone to land on any page of your website and find what they need with 3 clicks. Good navigation is simple, it's clear, and it's consistent. So let's talk about some of the types of navigation. On this page, you'll see that Find Law and Green Street both have main top navigation menus. Find Law, though, also has what's called a breadcrumb menu. So if you look under that image of the buildings and where you can fill in some information, you'll see that I'm on the what to do when employees do not want to return to work, that particular blog. And if you look right above that title, you can see that I got there from Free Enterprise, which I got from blogs, which I got from the welcome page of Find Law. So it has the whole trail of how I got to that particular blog. It's called the breadcrumb menu. And it's really helpful if you have a larger website so that people know where they are and how to get back to, if they want to go back a page or two to find out what else they had, where else they were. Green Street, I just like the tabs, the names of their navigation tabs. Philosophy, classes, brew guides. I think it just really speaks to their brand. I think they did a good job of selecting those navigation names. Other common navigation menus are the hamburger menu. It's mostly used on cell phones, on the mobile versions of websites, but I've used it occasionally on desktops for specific reasons. With the Alice Semplecraft website on the left, I just liked the way it looked with that skinny navigation bar on the left in the hamburger menu. I thought it looked more like a magazine. She's a magazine editor. It kind of went with the design. But I used it for a very different reason on the Northwest Bergen Regional Health Commission website. In that case, I used it because they had so many pages that if I had put them all up there on the top navigation menu, it would have taken up too much room and it would have been too confusing. And the drop-down portion of it would have covered the entire page. So I did it as a hamburger menu, which then, as you can see on the right, kind of pops out. And you get the menu clearer without the clutter of the website behind it, and you can select the next page that you want to go to. Another navigation type is what they're calling fat footers, and that's the one in the upper right-hand corner. This is Zappos up here on the upper right, and they've got a great, navigation bar at the top, but they also have the fat footer. So their entire navigation is spelled out again in the footer. So it's really, you can find anything you want from the top or the bottom. They have a lot of, it's good navigation to have it in several places, and buttons also. They can get you back and forth to where you want to be. All right, so in addition to navigation, we want to talk about page speed. Page speed is described as the time to fully load the web page. And Google now calculates page speed based on mobile load times, not desktop load times. The ideal web load time for mobile sites is under 3 seconds, and the faster the better. However, the average load time for mobile sites is 22 seconds. So when you're thinking about load time, a 1 second delay in page load time yields 11% fewer page views, a 16% decrease in customer satisfaction, and a 7% loss in conversion. Some of the things that can affect the load time are poor coding on the back end, too many widgets or plugins, too many HTTP redirect requests, large images, or videos that are loaded directly onto the website instead of using YouTube or Vimeo and then embedding them onto the site, or asynchronously loading of the CSS and JavaScripts. And it could also be related to your server, bad server or hosting. And I just want to talk about that for 1 second. Most of us in small business use shared hosting. It's a common low-cost option. This is where one server's resources are shared among multiple users. The problem with that can be if that server is really busy, you don't get the speed that you need. A step up from them are from shared servers, and somewhat more expensive are virtual private servers. And those plans give you a dedicated server and you have much more control over your site's speed. Dedicated servers are also, you know, a way to go, but that's usually a big business thing because that's very, very expensive. But if you're having some problems with your server, you might want to think about just changing servers. If, you know, if InMotion hosting is not working for you, you could try, you know, HostGator or something else, just to see if the server is what's affecting your website speed.
Susanna, we had
Okay,
a question. We just had a question on how many tabs do you recommend to have on your website? Maximum amount of tabs.
I don't know that there's a maximum. I mean, but I think that, you know, 6, 7 seems to me a good number. If you've got dozens, then people get really confused. You want to have enough so that people have a choice and understand what's going on, but not so many that they're overwhelmed. Like, think about when you get into the supermarket aisle and there's 47 different brands of, you know, Cheerios. I mean, like, you just want one, you want a box, you know? So you want to make sure that the menu has enough information so they can navigate properly, but not so much that it's overwhelming. If you have to make subpages, it's better to do that than to have everything like right on the front and confuse people with too many choices. I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about site structure. And, oh wait, were we talking about, finished speed. Okay, good. So let's talk about site structure. Site structure, search engine optimization, and ADA compliance. And I want to just get ADA compliance out of the way right now. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires that certain businesses make accommodations for people with disabilities. Web content should be accessible to blind users, deaf users, and those who must navigate by voice, screen reader, or other assistive technologies. The businesses that this applies to are businesses with 15 or more full-time employees, or businesses that fall under the category of public accommodation, such as hotels, banks, and public transportation. So if you're not in those categories, you don't strictly have to comply, but I will tell you that most of the stuff that's in the ADA compliance regulations are basic site structure types of things. Some of them are a little more difficult to achieve, but most of them are basic site structure functions. You can read through, and you'll get this PowerPoint later, so you can click and read through the WCAG guidelines and also the WCAG checklist on AIM, which could be helpful. If you have good site structure, you've gone a long way in meeting the ADA requirements. And also in getting Google to recognize and serve up your site, because good site structure is critical to search engine optimization. And Google is the main search engine that we're using. In fact, 75% of all searches start on Google. And the first 5 results on Google get 67% of all clicks. So if you can get yourself on the top page, you're doing really well. So let's talk about search engine optimization.
There was a question on whether, what do you think of the GoDaddy as a hosting?
It's okay. I've had my issues with GoDaddy and I have moved people off GoDaddy. Just, yes, we could discuss that offline if somebody wants to talk about other options, but it's not my favorite. It used to be better than it was. Now I think they've got too much business and they're a little bit overwhelmed. At least that's my take on it, because some of their servers are pretty slow. Okay, so search engine optimization is the process of optimizing your content so that the search engine chooses to show your website as the top result for certain keywords or keyword phrases. On-page and on-page SEO concerns all of Google's ranking factors that they determine by directly looking at the page you're trying to optimize, such as your headlines, your content, and your page structure. Off-page SEO refers to all of the variables that Google takes a look at that aren't exclusively in your hands, that depends on other sources, such as social networks, other blogs in your industry, or the personal history of the searcher. So in terms of on-page SEO, when I do WordPress sites, and this site in the middle that I did for Leslie Farber is a WordPress site. On the left is the Yoast plugin on the back end. Yoast is a great tool to get your SEO set up correctly. It helps you figure out the keywords, the subheadings, the meta descriptions, title tags. It makes sure you've got all of them in place and gives you a green good score or a yellow caution score or a red fail score. So you know that you've got all of that information set up correctly. If you're using a different type of website builder platform, a lot of them have their own SEO plugins available. So check the back end of that for whatever platform you're building on, okay? I also like to check on color contrast compliance for the ADA compliance kind of rules. In this particular case, if you notice the blue practice area section on the bottom of Leslie's site, we had originally done that in a lighter shade of blue. And when I tested the color compliance at the WAG AIM site here, the Web AIM site rather here, it failed for normal size text. So we had to go in and make the blue a deeper blue so that it would be compliant. She doesn't strictly have to be compliant because she's like a solo practitioner, but on the other hand, she's a lawyer and she doesn't want to get, she feels like she should be compliant. So we went through that kind of stuff for her website, and I do it for several other clients as well. You can go to the Web AIM color contrast checker. Just click on the link in the bottom later and test your colors on your website. You see that in the foreground color, I have the white, and in the background color, I have the blue, and we've passed on everything except for normal text on a AAA level, but I go for single or doubles. AAA levels are for major corporations. That's a much higher standard. So I don't worry about that for most of my clients. Okay, so once you've got your website all set up and you think the SEO is good, then what you want to look at is cross-browser and cross-device compatibility. You need to look at that website on your phone. You need to look, and if you've got an iPhone, you need to grab somebody's Android and look at it on that. You need to look at it on the desktop. You need to look at it on a laptop. You need to look at it on an iPad. You need to look at it on Chrome, you need to look at it on Firefox, and you need to look at it on Safari. You need to look at it everywhere because every browser and every device is going to display it differently. And you want to make sure that it looks good on every device and on every browser type, okay? So let's talk a little bit about website building platforms. So I've separated them into three categories here. The great thing about most of these website builder platforms is that they offer templates for a range of different industries. You can pick the one you like and just add it to your own, add your own text and pictures and kind of make it your own. It means you're not working from a blank slate, which is great. It makes it easier to get a finished product. Most website builder platforms are great for small, mid-sized businesses. You can do, portfolios, photographers, online stores, restaurants, hotels. I've done law offices, whatever. You can do any kind of variety on any of these platforms. But if it requires more, if it requires a real database, for real estate listings or a real job board, that's not something you want to do except on WordPress. The other platforms can't handle that kind of, information. So WordPress is a free and open source website builder, which means you have maximum control over the website compared with any of these other builders on the list. It gives you complete control, and it has enough plugins and flexibility to really do anything. You could do an e-commerce store, you could do a community forum, you could build your own social network, you could do a membership website, a personal website. The learning curve for WordPress is a little more difficult than it is for some of these other website builders. So you might need help with the back end to get a WordPress site set up correctly. The rest
What
of
about,
these,
a question, what about Squarespace?
yes, we're going to talk about that next. Good, good. Thank you. Squarespace is one of those that was developed as an e-commerce site. It also does some great blogging, but BigCommerce, Shopify, and Squarespace. If you're going to have an e-commerce site, you want to use one of those. Those are the best for e-commerce. They're, you know, you can do other things with them, but unless you're doing e-commerce, I wouldn't use those kinds of the middle row here. If you're doing a more basic website with, you know, like an accounting business, a law firm, a restaurant, whatever, you can use Wix, Weebly, or GoDaddy. But I wouldn't put it on a BigCommerce website. You know, you have all that framework for the store commerce section that you're not going to be utilizing. It's a waste. So Wix, Weebly, GoDaddy, those are website design platforms that are very flexible. You could do small stores in them. I wouldn't do anything big and heavy, but if you got a little shop, that would work fine. Let me just also mention hosting in relation to these website builders. When you're on WordPress, you build the website and then you decide where to host it. You could host it on GoDaddy, you could host it on HostGator, you could host it on InMotion Hosting. You decide where it's going. When you develop a website on one of these other platforms, the hosting is on that platform. You cannot take your Weebly website and decide I'm going to put it on Squarespace. It does not work that way. The website that you build on one of these platforms lives on one of these platforms and cannot be moved off the platform, at least not with great difficulty. So you need to think about that also as you move forward and decide where you're going to build your website and where you want it to live.
That brings up a question. That brings up a question. Somebody asked, is WordPress compatible with large SQL databases or only its own setup? Is that appropriate?
I'm sorry, is it compatible with what?
SQL.
SQL, I don't know that.
Databases.
I have to check. I don't have an answer for that one, sorry.
Okay.
I know WordPress handles a lot of databases, but I don't know specifically about SQLs. So I mean, yeah, not sure about that, sorry. I think that that's really most of my presentation, so we could take questions and answers if people have other questions. And if you have anything that comes up down the road, please feel free to contact me.
Just put your questions up either in Q&A or in the chat. We got one. We had a question. What best for consulting services like coaching? I guess who it is.
What website platform? Is that what
It
he's
says,
asking?
what's best for consulting service like coaching?
I'd use Wix. I think, and let me just explain, Wix is a drag and drop platform, which means that as you move things around on your screen, what you see is what you get. It's what's going to look like at the front end. Some of the other platforms, even Weebly, and I'll go back a page. Weebly, I've used for a couple of clients just because they started on it. I wouldn't have chosen it. But that one is a little more difficult. Some of it is, you know, drag and drop, but some of it is not quite as intuitive. I think out of these three on the bottom, I like Wix the best. I think it's the most flexible, and I think it's got the most bells and whistles. So I would do that for most small businesses, especially businesses that want to get in the back end once the website is built. You know, when clients say to me, yeah, I want you to make my website, but I want to be able to manage it and update it. Great. Okay, we're going to do it in Wix because I know they'll be able to handle it because that's a pretty easy one. WordPress is a little more complicated, and you know, you're working from the back end and hoping it looks good when you look at the front end of it, kind of thing.
We had a question about, does Wix own the domain name? So if I change, can I use that name?
No, you own your own domain name. And domain names can live with you. You purchase that yourself. So you can, if you buy a domain name and you build it on Wix and then you decide you're going to go to WordPress, that's fine. You can take it with you.
Okay, a question. Recommend how to name your website. Limits on length. What appears best? Better or worse to just use your name?
I think the name of the website should reflect the business, unless you are the business. If it's, you know, Sarah's coaching, then Sarah should be in the name of it. But the name of the website should be the name of the business. You want to make sure that you can buy that URL. So don't think of a great website name and then say, oh, okay, I'm going to get the URL and it's gone. So you have to do it kind of simultaneously. I don't know if you're familiar with the Whois. If you go to whois.com, you can look, you can try out any number of website names and they'll tell you if it's available or not. So, you know, I've had people say, oh, I want the website name to be, and they can't get the domain. Also, don't make it too long, because you're going to want to put an email attached to it. It's going to be, you know, Suzanne at whatever the website name is, and people are going to have to type in that website name. So you don't want it to be Suzanne at, you know, and 27 words later kind of thing. You want it to be nice and short so that they can get it written quickly and correctly.
Question, where to get stock images to include on your site?
I use Adobe stock photos, but there's Dreamstime, there's Shutterstock. Any of those have a, you know, a nice range of images.
Suzanne, I'm not sure how you want to answer this, but somebody asked if you wanted you to review their website. Will she do that? And I don't know what your arrangements are.
No, I do that all the time, because people come to me and say, oh my God, my website needs help. Well, what does that mean? Is it back end help? Is it front end help? I just did an analysis for a restaurant in South Orange, and we couldn't believe the number of errors on there. Everything from missing H1 tags to duplicate H1 tags, crazy stuff all over the place. But lots of stuff was broken and needs to be fixed. And yes, we do that.
Okay. There was a comment that somebody has SQL or SQL WordPress info in the chat. So I guess that's
good.
the answer to that.
Somebody
question.
could answer that for me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Websites are small. What is your expertise and mission is building websites for small businesses?
Well, I think my expertise is getting the essence of the business onto the website, so that we're conveying exactly what that business, what their mission and vision is. I do the designs. I do some of the back end stuff, but I really get the concept, the visual concept, and make sure that we can convey the essence of that business at a glance. So that's my, but we do all kinds of online marketing, but that's really what my strength is identifying and building a website that reflects what that business is all about.
Suzanne, we got a question, and you've covered it generally, but they want you to zero in on how to name your website. Limit on length, what appears best, better or worse to just use your name.
I think we went through that. We did that question.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know that that there's an absolute limit. Obviously, you don't want to have a website name that if you're typing it out because you want it's www dot, here we are in the future and the past.com. I mean, it's like, it's too many words. Here we are.com would be better. I just think that people, when you name a website, it should be the essence of the business. It should convey what the business is about. It should be the name of the business, but it shouldn't be too long, because people have to type it in as they look for your website. They have to type it in to send you an email. So you have to make sure that you've got a balance between the correct name for your business, and how that name is able to be used, I mean, typed.
In the chat section, Bill Treelor put in a website, a link to a website that's 5 rules of choosing a domain name. So
Oh, that's great. Oh, hi, Bill. Thank you.
Another question. There's actually 2 questions. For the person who wrote, I would like her to look at mine, or is there anybody in SCORE to help make my Wix website better? My suggestion is consult with Susanna. I'm not sure there's anybody with specific experience that in our chapter that would have Wix experience. Then we have a question. Can you clarify the statement of moving our websites? First, you replied that GoDaddy not her favorite because they are too large now. Then said you could not move it. It lives there. If I wanted to move my site from GoDaddy, is it possible?
GoDaddy hosts WordPress sites. So yes, that's a different thing. It's not like a website builder such as, I mean, they have a website builder, but it's a WordPress website builder. So you can move that off of GoDaddy. GoDaddy has, like, it's got a lot of components to it now, but yes, GoDaddy does hosting. Like, I can build a WordPress website somewhere else on somebody else's server, and then I can have it hosted on GoDaddy. I can build it on GoDaddy as a WordPress site, and then I can move it someplace else, because I have built websites on GoDaddy and then move them to HostGator. Yes, you can do that. You can't do that with BigCommerce, with Shopify, with Squarespace, with Wix, or with Weebly. If you build those on their platforms, they must live there. They are not WordPress, different thing.
Question, what are the specific dimensions that we should be using for our website for pictures? Or is it depending what hosting service we use?
Okay, I don't know if she means the actual dimensions of the pictures or the bytes in the pictures. Like a lot of pictures, if you take a great picture with the iPhone, it could be 2 megabytes, too big. That is never going to load on the website quickly. You need to bring that down to maybe 500 kilobytes kind of thing. So that has to be reduced in size for that. The dimensions of the how big the picture is, width and height, that's the kind of thing that will depend on where on your website is it going to be used. So, if it's a full screen, you're going to want it about, maybe 2,200 pixels wide. But if you're putting it in the center of the website, 500, 600, depends on what you're going to do with it. All right. So there's 2 different components to that. But make sure that if you've got these, especially if you're using pictures from like a service, if you're buying Adobe pictures or you're going to, Shutterstock, the pictures that they have, most of them are somewhere between 1 and 3 or 4 megabytes. Those will have to be reduced to be used on the web. They're much too dense. They're much information, way too slow to load.
Okay. Next question, which website builder platform would you recommend for a small online retail business? And a second question, in addition to social media, what other options do you suggest for online marketing?
Okay, so that was a retail business? I mean, an e-commerce business she's talking about? I would, depending on the size of the business, you could use Shopify, Squarespace, or Wix. All of those would handle, you know, small, mid-sized retail businesses. All right. And then the question was social media, Facebook for sure, and Instagram probably, depending on the product. I'm not sure what the product line is.
Next question is, what expenses can you expect to produce and continue with a website?
I'm sorry, say that again?
What expenses can you expect? Or in other words, how much could it cost to produce and then to continue with a website, I guess, for maintenance?
Okay, so there's a variety of different expenses that go with a website. There's the development and creation of the website. There's the hosting on a monthly or annual basis, and there's the domain and updates, you know, along the way if you need them, especially with WordPress, you do. So to build a website, most websites can be built for, you know, anywhere from, you know, I'd say $2,500 and up, depending on the size of the website. Hosting costs are generally in the $10 to $20 a month range. And domain costs, you know, should be $10 a year kind of thing. So those are the average costs for, you know, website development, hosting, design kind of thing.
Okay, the question related to size was pixels. She came back and said that's the size that she was referring to. Okay,
but again, it's going to depend on where on your website you want to use it. Let me just go back a couple of screens. Are they still looking at my screen?
I guess they are, yeah.
Okay, so if you look at Mealy's Restaurants, go over there. It's great. It's not if you're in Nutley, New Jersey. But the images in the top, I would venture to say those are probably 600 pixels wide by maybe 400 high. Somewhere in that range. If you're using a full screen, like if it was something that went full across, it would probably be about 2,000 pixels wide. So it really depends on where you're going to use it. And you got to fit it into whatever slot you want and make sure that, you know, it works in that area.
Okay, question. Can you review SEO again? How, where do you enter it on your website?
What website are they talking about? What platform?
Barbara, can you just type in what platform you're talking about? So while we're waiting for her, what program is best for taking pictures and videos for the website?
Oh, I don't know. I download pictures. People send me pictures off their iPhones all the time to put on their websites. I don't know about a program that does that specifically.
Okay.
Where's that?
Barbara responded and said Squarespace for that question about SEO.
Okay. Squarespace has, I believe, their own. Sure, I'll be honest. I'm not sure. Squarespace, the SEO in the back end. Maybe somebody else on this call would know, but Squarespace should have their own SEO plugin. I know that Wix does. I know that Weebly does. I have not worked directly in Squarespace, so I don't want to say whether it does or doesn't. But I would think that it's got its own SEO components. I mean, plugin. I don't think you can attach Yoast to that. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. Sorry, don't know that exactly.
Okay, which platform is best for? Oops. I lost that one. But somebody put it up? Oh, for educational consulting services.
You could do WordPress, you could do Wix, Weebly, or, you know, the GoDaddy website builder. Don't use the e-commerce ones. It's not necessary. but that you could do that in anything. I mean, it depends on exactly educational consulting services. Are they going to offer online classes on that particular site? You know, you know, I'm not sure exactly what's involved, but WordPress, Wix, Weebly, GoDaddy, those would be fine.
Okay. The person who, well, somebody just said that Yoast SEO only works with WordPress. Bill suggested.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that I've worked in Shopify, I've worked in Wix, I've worked in Weebly, I've worked in WordPress. I have not worked directly in Squarespace, but I would venture to say that Squarespace, because they are one of the top rated small business website builders, would have their own SEO plugin at the back end. I know the rest of them do. So, you know, Google that and see what you can find out about them, or give them a call about that.
And circling back to the question about pictures and videos, there's a clarification. Is there a program that you use to doctor the pictures or videos on the website?
I do. I use Photoshop. Yeah, absolutely. I have to. I get pictures. You can't believe the pictures I get. They're too big. They're too small. They're too green. They're too yellow. But I bring everything into Photoshop and I size it correctly. I make sure that if I need a 500 by 500 pixel picture, that it is exactly 500 by 500. And then I will make sure that it's not a 2.7 megabyte, but it's 500 kilobytes. And then I'll bring it into the website. So I use that. But you could try Canva. Canva is pretty good at a lot of this photo editing stuff, and they've got a decent free program. So try that one.
Okay, I'm not showing any more questions now. So if you have a question, please type it in. Bill suggests Photoshop Elements is much cheaper than Photoshop and just as good. Bill Treelor suggested that.
Okay, thanks, Bill. I used Elements years ago. I didn't know it was still around.
And follow up to the Photoshop question, do they edit videos?
I don't edit videos. I have somebody that does that for me, so I don't want to pretend to know anything about that. But if I need videos edited, I have somebody that I use that does that. So I can't really answer video questions.
I'm just going to make an announcement that we do send out the recording and the deck, the slide deck, in a few days. So people are asking me that. It will be sent to everybody who is on the call right now.
Great.
And okay, again, any additional questions? Wait a minute. What is the?
We're getting a question about getting the presentation video, and that's on YouTube.
Oh, that's on YouTube.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I thought there was a question. I saw it before. Well, first is, can you talk about pictures affecting page loading quicker? I think we covered that. What sizes do you recommend? I think we covered that size. There was I don't know, it disappeared. There was a question about Score and Suzanne. You don't have to go through Score to get to Suzanne. She can go directly to her. If that was the question. It was up there and it disappeared. Okay, anything else? Okay. Suzanne, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.
A lot of great information. And thank you so much for everybody's time and attendance. We had a great amount of people on this call, and there's 40 of us, and we appreciate it. And as Jim suggested, there are some upcoming webinars, so please check our website for them.
We'd be happy to mentor anybody who registered today, or if you know somebody else who would be benefit from a mentor or if you need a referral to a paid consultant, such as a website designer, please visit our website. If you want the presentation video, our YouTube channel is most easily found if you go to SCORE Northwest NJ, not written out. SCORE Northwest NJ. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.